I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Omni at the Movies, where today our subject is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I figured after seeing the first Sonic the Hedgehog and commenting on the trailer for the second film, may as well go and see it and share my thoughts. Now, just to get you up to speed on what I thought of the first one, I do recommend you go watch that video if you want all the details, but my thoughts on the first one were that it was good. It was a good way to start. It wasn't necessarily the best Sonic movie we could have hoped for. Given what we could have gotten, it was a miracle that it turned out good at all. But I still kind of felt like it was playing it a little safe by transporting all the action to Earth, not going full in with certain aspects of the classic games and such, and introducing all of those human characters who weren't originally part of the series and we didn't really care about all that much. But at the same time, the movie still remembered that the character we were there to see, well, his name is in the title. We come to see Sonic the Hedgehog, and Dr. Robotnik, of course, but that's because he's the villain. And the fact that the movie remembered that and not only kept Sonic in focus the whole time, but also gave him a real, genuine emotional arc, one that actually was woven together fairly well with that one human character, Tom Wachowski, it turned out all right. At the same time, though, I was only going to let it play it safe that time because I felt like, okay, you're not sure you can sell something as high concept as talking blue hedgehog that runs like the wind to a general audience. Fans like me who know the character from way back and have followed his legacy throughout, okay, we're ready to jump in head first, but maybe not John Q. Public. So now that you've introduced the concept, now you have a second movie coming, you have no excuses to not go further. And that was the hope. So what does that mean for Sonic the Hedgehog 2? I do think it is an improvement in certain ways. I feel like it's still not quite a perfect film, but for what it's worth, the virtues far outweigh the flaws. As far as disappointments, the biggest one has to be, again, in the human cast, particularly the secondary and tertiary characters. I'm sorry to the actors who played those roles. You did a good job, don't get me wrong, but every time we cut to those characters doing those things, it felt like an interruption. It felt like we were being distracted from the main crux of the movie, and not in a way that it was like, oh, we are watching as these other characters we care about are going through their own tribulations. Not like that. It really did feel like, oh great, you're dragging us away from Sonic and Tails again. In particular, there's a moment leading up to the third act where they basically find a way to temporarily take Sonic and Tails out of the movie just to give a couple of the human characters something to do, because otherwise they wouldn't have anything to do. And yeah, I don't really think that whole sequence was completely necessary. It probably could have been written out. At the very least, it could have been trimmed down significantly. But I don't know. That would be my biggest critique. And also, yes, they still kept the action on Earth. We're not going to another world. They didn't suddenly transport us to Mobius or something. We're still on Earth. So if you were hoping that we do some world hopping in this one, well, that's not going to happen. That being said, they did give more of a reason for it to be on Earth. they're sort of making Earth look and feel a bit more like what we would see in the games or the comics or the cartoons and so on. So they're making better use of the setting than just, we want to play it safe, so we've brought Sonic to Earth because reasons. So it's not like staying on Earth is that big of a problem, but if you were hoping that they would go all out and bring us to alien worlds for the majority of the runtime, they don't do that. And yes, there is some cringy humor in there. And some humor that feels like they were thinking, it's for kids, we have to include this because the executive producer said so, or some such nonsense. And some of it lands, some of it doesn't. But predominantly, I would say it skews slightly more in the direction of landing. You're not going to necessarily laugh at everything, especially not if you're an adult. If you're a kid, you might laugh a little bit more. But, I mean, that's just the way it is. I certainly would have written it differently, but that's just me. Now, as far as what works, well, we already knew going in that Jim Carrey was a good casting choice for Robotnik. Here he goes even more over the top because, you know, ever since the end of the first movie, he's been isolated on a mushroom planet. Of course, he's going to be a little bit loopy after that. But he feels more like he is embracing the fact that he is playing a cartoon villain for all intents and purposes. He goes with the wild stash. He is not phoning it in, as far as I can tell. He is taking it completely seriously. He's doing a good job playing off of characters who technically are not there. So I got nothing bad to say about him in this role. And by the end, well, I won't get into spoilers, but by the end, it really does feel like he has gone full Robotnik. And to be clear about the human characters, I did specify secondary and tertiary. The primary human characters, Tom and Maddie Wachowski, they work much better. They're not in the movie as much as they were in the first movie. They are actually far removed from the action for the vast majority of the runtime. And even once they're back in the scene, they only play so big of a role. Most of the focus remains on Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and Robotnik, the characters who are from the games that we actually came there to see. But I want to specify, Tom and Maddie actually do matter here. They mattered in the first movie too, because we were seeing as they formed this connection, and by the end they had won me over. I wasn't necessarily thinking, woo, my new favorite Sonic characters, but I was like, yeah, I'm okay with them sticking around. And watching them in this movie, it's clear that they're trying to form more of a family dynamic with Sonic. And Sonic's maybe just a little bit resistant to it, which forms part of his arc. And I feel like the bond they have, that Tom and Maddie have with Sonic and vice versa, I feel like that is genuine. It really does feel like something I believe, that they do have this sort of parent-child relationship with him. It works. I mean, it's, again, not the greatest thing in the movie, but it does work. But just like the first time around, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 knows where the focus must remain. On Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik. I already said Jim Carrey did a good job as Robotnik, and we know that Ben Schwartz was a good idea for Sonic, especially with that design. The design that they went with over the super hideous original design. And no, I do not believe that was a marketing tactic. I do not believe it for a second. We got the new design though, so that's what they're sticking with. Thank the Lord. So we already know Sonic still works. But the newcomers, well, to the movies anyway, are Tails and Knuckles. Tails is voiced by Colleen O'Shaughnessy, just like he has been for at least a good chunk of the franchise. She's voiced him in various games and various cartoons, and we already know she's great as Tails just from those. And she's actually, so far, the only legacy actor here, if you will. Sorry, no Jaleel White cameo in this movie. But All the same, what she brings to this version of Tails, I think that works really well. She fully embraces it. She knows this character well. She knows how to play him perfectly. And this version of Tails really is good. Tails has a good arc of his own. Part of this movie's whole thing is that this is a first meeting between Sonic and Tails. Other times when we've seen them, it's usually established that they've already known each other well before the audience came to see what they were doing. This is a first meeting, however. And I think as first meetings go, it makes sense. Tails is a character who knew about Sonic thanks to observing the events of the first movie, and doesn't necessarily have idol worship, but certainly admires him. And now that he's actually getting to be part of Sonic's adventures, we see him not only grow into being an actual hero, but we also see how that friendship with Sonic forms. And it's actually one of the more heartfelt moments of the movie, that moment where, after a scene that I admit is kind of ridiculous, they have a chance to just sort of sit back and have a little heart-to-heart, and we really get to see how they decide, yeah, we're going to stick together. We belong together as friends. And yeah, I felt a little something in here when that happened. That was well played. And then, of course, we have Idris Elba as Knuckles. Now, we knew Knuckles was going to be in it from the beginning. Back when the movie was first announced, I was actually talking with friends about how Knuckles seemed like the kind of role that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would play, and initially he was in talks for that role, and then apparently Jason Momoa at some point, but eventually they settled on Idris Elba. And Idris Elba's a great actor, of course, and he's done voice work before for several Disney films. There's always that question, though, of how invested will he be? Because, you know, he's done genre work before. He was very invested in Pacific Rim. Surprisingly, he was invested in Ghost Rider: The Spirit of Vengeance. But when you get to the Thor movies, you do kind of get the sense that he's with Anthony Hopkins in the "I'd rather not be here wearing this stupid costume" company. So, you know, playing Knuckles the Echidna, that's one of those ones where you're going in and you're kind of wondering, so which is this going to be? Is he going to be invested or not? Luckily, he is invested. It was, and again, great casting. He voices Knuckles with such a sense of seriousness that it's certainly sincere. You really do believe that Knuckles is this deadly serious all the time. But it's also funny right when it needs to be, and dramatic right when it needs to be. That's actually another thing that the movie did well. It remembers that these characters may be cartoon animals, but they're not cartoon animals. It's not like Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny, where their primary shtick is doing comedy and sight gags and verbal humor and whatnot. Sonic and his crew can actually be very dramatic characters at times. They can crack jokes with the best of them, sure. The dry humor of Sonic Boom, the animated series, I mean, that was a very sharply written show. But interestingly, the more cartoony Sonic gets, like in that one Saturday morning cartoon, not Sonic Sat AM, but the other one, that's where Sonic was at his weakest, if you ask most people. The more dramatic the stories are, the more seriously they take the characters, even if they're still allowed to crack jokes and whatnot. That's when these characters are really interesting, because we do care about them. It's one of the strangest things where, even though they are these odd-looking little anthropomorphic animals, we take them as seriously as we would, say, Batman or Spider-Man. It's the weirdest thing, but it's true. And just like the first movie, the second movie remembers that as well. We get those heartfelt moments between Sonic and Tails. We get to know Knuckles and care about him. And those three are the emotional core of this film. But at the end of the day, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is yet another piece of escapism in a world that sorely needs more escapist entertainment. It's not political, it's not telling you who to vote for, or how you should feel about such and such an oppressed group. Closest it gets is like you might be able to read a little metaphor into how Sonic and Tails and Knuckles are all kind of outsiders. But, you know, that being said, they can represent anyone. They could represent whatever movement you currently feel like supporting on Twitter, or it can just represent somebody who's a little bit different and just doesn't feel like he fits in with everyone else. Because, I mean, they are anthropomorphic animals at the end of the day. They don't represent only white people or only black people or what have you. Tails, Sonic, Knuckles, they can represent anyone. They can be anyone. They're not limited by such paltry things as race. But that being said, that's not even what this movie is about. Its primary focus is to be a fun adventure, just taking you on a ride with these characters, sending them all around the world into these harrowing situations with some pretty impressive fight scenes, especially between Sonic and Knuckles. And at the end of the day, that's all it really needs to be. Again, I wouldn't say that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a perfect film, nor would I say it is the best Sonic the Hedgehog movie we could possibly hope to get. I'm still hoping for them to lean more into the stuff that we really love about the franchise in the films to come. I'm still hoping they bring in as many characters as they can. There's one character they tease in a mid-credits scene. I won't spoil who it is. I will say that I pretty much called that this character would be present for at least the third movie. Like way, way back, I kind of figured this is the character they would go with. But I want to see more of that. I want to see more of a focus on these characters. I want them to bring in whoever they can. Not just to have them, of course. They have to actually be there for a purpose. But I do think, like, we will really get to see the full potential if they decide to fully lean into what made these things work in the first place. But that being said, even though it's not perfect, it's still a good time at the movies. Good way for families to spend a weekend or an evening, and it doesn't need to be anything else, really. That's all it has to be. Movies can be fun. Movies can just be a way for you to sit back and forget about your troubles for a little while. They don't have to be espousing messages to you. They don't have to be telling you who to vote for. Sometimes you just want to watch a hedgehog and an echidna duke it out in an ancient temple. Just like sometimes you want to watch a giant gorilla and a giant radioactive dinosaur duke it out in the heart of Hong Kong. So, I would say Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is worth it. Again, not perfect, but it's good. And in the end, I can't fault it that much for its flaws. Because it does just enough right that the flaws are forgivable. And that's about all I have to say on it for now. Again, I could get into spoilers, but I try not to do spoilers in these kind of videos. So maybe I'll do a separate spoiler video another day. Who knows? But until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.